So then I did eventually get to be on play shoes, but I was not the most graceful one in the class for sure. So then when the kids get used to that, you can have them then sit down. So that's the ballet activity where you like show them, and like with kindergartners, well, really all of them, they'll like that.
I'm going to do with the third graders. If the boys are really giggly and not wanting to do I
show them the video?
Okay.
I think once
or
you
show them the
like,
pictures.
my son is a 4th grader. The minute I tell him about dancing and voice, he's one of those that starts giggling and laughing. So if I were teaching that class, what I would do is I would talk about it. I would give it the biblio first. I'll talk about the history first, and then I would tell them I want to present something to you, and I'll show the video where the girls and boys are dancing together. Then I would just show the boy part,
Yeah.
and the boys would definitely be taking it back.
Because
then you can ask them to what she did next. Now what she made us do. So once you've done showing the boys part, then I would ask them to try it out. They'll be more welcoming.
And I did print out a lot of football teams make their football players take ballet because it makes them more graceful. So you see these giant football players. There were some pictures with like actual NFL jerseys on, but they were terrible pictures, and so I didn't use them. These are more obviously in a dance class. Yeah, so that they can see that it's kind of more. It doesn't make them more
about the
Okay, so then let's see. So then the intro to the painting, so that would be the intro to ballet, and really you have to do the intro to ballet before you go to the painting, because Edgar Degas, you'll go to the painting, and this is the painting we're using. God, you have to be really careful. We're actually using this tissue thing I made, so I'm not sure. I'm going to try to figure out what to put that in so that it doesn't tear apart. So this is the painting that we're using. It's ballet school. So is this the picture of school to you? Is this what you would think school would look like? What do you think? No. But if you're going to be a ballet dancer, this would be what school would look like. Now, if you look at this is pretty accurate in the way the ballerinas are depicted, but he is an artist, and so he does definitely take some license here. He adds a few things to these. So if anybody has ever taken dancing, they'll know you don't have a bow around. Yeah, there are a lot of bows all over the place. So
it could be they're rehearsing for a show.
Yeah, they could be rehearsing.
They're all in their costumes.
Yes, but like they're all like back here doing exercises, and you've got people coming down the stairs. They could be rehearsing, but they did point out that he might have added those bows just for color, right? But he was fascinated with ballet. He always was. He actually came from an upper middle class family in France. He was born in Paris, and he initially studied law and then switched. I've noticed one of our artist or composer, I can't remember, started in law and then switched over. That actually is pretty common. So usually the family doesn't want them to start in an artistic vein. But his family was very supportive of him, and because he had money, he didn't have to worry about that. He was very, very well trained. He ended up going to a conservatory in Paris, He didn't go to Académie de Beaux-Arts, but he did learn all the real fine technical aspects of painting. And he did have, there are other paintings, so it actually then has you go into the history of Degas, but that's where the order comes in. I have a second print from him that is drastically different, and I haven't even pulled out Degas' picture. So this is a second print. Fortunately, we have a second print for everything now. So ballet school is here, and then this is the horse races. So he did actually do a lot of paintings of horses as well. He actually was really different from a lot of the other painters of that time. He was classically trained, neoclassical training, but he ended up really loving Impressionism. So if you remember last year we talked about Impressionism. And so I have this for you to show them. You can decide when you want to bring this in. So if you didn't teach FAME last year, the Impressionism, this shows that this is a map of France, Eiffel Tower, that they were typically outdoor, and that it's not as realistic, right, as most painting. It's not realism. Impressionism is giving you an impression of what things look like. And if you used the water lilies in the last lesson, then you'll notice that you'll pull this out as well, as far as the Impressionism is concerned. So you can look at these, and the contrast here is pretty great. So you'll talk about Degas was a lot more realistic, though, than Monet, for example. He did, like if you look, I mean, these are really impressionistic flowers. I mean, it's almost hard to distinguish what's going on here. These are clearly horses and riders. These are clearly ballet dancers. So he's more realistic, and he's very deliberate about where he puts his paint on the canvas. He's very strategic about it. And so then you can show these. One of the things about Degas that was different, most impressionistic painters painted outside only. He mostly painted indoors. So there are a couple famous paintings of his. He painted about 2,000 paintings, and a lot of them, I mean, they're inside in the ballet, or it's a woman getting out of the bath, drying her foot, like really mundane tasks, which we can't show because she's naked. But it's just indoor scenes, which is unusual for an impressionist. Usually you're trying to get natural light. The horses are natural light, but the most of the other stuff isn't. He'll try to bring in like windows, but a lot of his things are on stage ballet performances where it's not natural light at all. There's a little natural light here because you know there's some windows. One of the things you can do here is have the kids show them. So line, like last time we were talking about texture a lot. For Degas, line was really important. And so they have you put this up. So this is actually lines, and you just showed them this painting. And you can actually bring other prints if you want, other just copies. But lines were really important to him. So he would start off with kind of lines on paper to get an idea of where he wanted to put things. And this actually is, and you have to have it in the right place. So, it's this way. And you can see this is actually where the spiral staircase is along the side. You can kind of tell that that's where the spiral staircase would go. So then you overlay this so you can see all the lines in the painting where you've got some vertical and horizontal lines. Now I have to redo this because there are a lot of vertical and horizontal where the ballerinas come in, that they're curved lines, and they do go into body lines and curved lines and how body lines typically aren't straight. So I have to redo this one, and I'm going to see if I can get a little less fragile paper for this, like a tracing paper instead, so that it doesn't fall apart like that. So the line activity, there's so much in this lesson. If you go into the line activity, it's going to take forever. So I just skipped over the line activity, but you can, if you want, if you're going through that, you can decide if you like that. Let's see. So Degas was just a real cynical, quiet, kind of an angry guy toward the end. He was 83 or 84 when he died. But he did paint a ton. He painted 2,000 pieces, like we were saying. And he walked the streets of Paris toward the end of his life, just kind of, inspiring fear and pity in people. He was kind of a lonely guy, never married. And so, he just kind of led kind of a lonely life. He was very interested in line and things. And so the way they segue into Tchaikovsky is that ballet dancers make interesting. Actually, I can't even figure out how they did it. It doesn't really transition very well. So then I'd probably just say, do you remember the music that we were listening to at the beginning? Who remembers that? So that is Tchaikovsky. His name's Peter Tchaikovsky, and we just talked about Peter Bruegel. And Peter Bruegel's first name was spelled Pioter. And unfortunately, they spelled his name wrong in this. Tchaikovsky's name is Piotr. It's the Russian spelling. so I don't know why they spelled it wrong here. But it's the same, it's almost the same spelling. Peter Tchaikovsky. He was also an unhappy man. He didn't live as long as Degas, but he lived a pretty unhappy life until the very end. But he was an amazing composer. So when he was 4 years old, his sister Sasha helped him write a piece of music for his mom. And this piece was really beautiful. So he was very close to his sister Sasha, and his family really encouraged his musical abilities. But he did end up studying law first and switching over to music. So it's interesting, both of them did that. So Tchaikovsky was fascinated with, yeah.
No, he's trying to pronounce your last name.
Oh, you just forget about the T. Tchaikovsky. And it'll show you Tchaikovsky. Some people say Tchaikovsky, but I don't say it that way. Tchaikovsky.
Tchaikovsky.
Yeah. So it's harder to say than most words. So Tchaikovsky was, at the time that he was composing, ballet music was kind of passé. Like it wasn't very, and people just didn't think it was very interesting. And so he really brought back, the music that he wrote for ballet was amazing. Now, when you're doing the bio for Tchaikovsky, depending on how much you want to talk about, what they suggest is that you use the 1812 overture, because you're going to talk about the Nutcracker, but the 1812 overture is a big departure from the Nutcracker. It's really different. And Una, if I can use your phone, so the very first, if you look up 1812 overture on YouTube, the very first thing is a 15-minute and 9-second version of the overture. The finale in the overture is not what you want. You want the 15-minute version. So, and you can make notes. So you can start playing it when you're talking about Tchaikovsky. He's from Russia. And I think I turned it off. Okay, let's look how cute. Thank you. And volume. So you can start playing. It starts out really quiet. So the kids will notice. You'll ask them what instruments. So these are almost all violins. And then you can start talking about Tchaikovsky. One thing I would point out is that 3 minutes and 45 seconds is when they're going to start recognizing the music. I thought it was 3 minutes and 40. Oh, I backed it up too much. I just went to 35, sorry. So they might recognize that. That's kind of a famous refrain from 1812 overture. So there, and then again.
If they all watched Little Einsteins, which I
right, they will totally recognize it.
There was an episode.
Yes, that's right. I remember that episode. And then there's another melody that comes in that. So the other melody, so it's dun, 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 but then it also goes, let's see. So dun 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 dun. So those are two separate melodies. They actually come in, but it's not till the very end. It's 1 minute before the end. If you go to 14 minutes in the video. Well, it's not a video, in the audio. If you go to 14 minutes, that's where this is actually the version where on the stage they use cannons. There are cannons firing. They're obviously not firing cannonballs, but they're actually using real cannons on stage. That's a cannon. So, and it says full version with cannons, so it'll tell you you're using the right one. And there's only a minute toward the end, but you can talk about dynamics there because it goes from real quiet at the very beginning of the piece, and it does get really loud. So the first time they introduce that melody, it's not very loud. When you get to the last minute, it is loud and kind of crazy. So that's the 1812 overture. And during that time, you can kind of explain a little bit about Tchaikovsky. He He was very young. He ended up teaching piano lessons. He taught music lessons when he was younger to try to raise money. He ended up getting piano lessons when he was 8, but surpassed his teacher by the time he was like 9. So he was just really, really advanced, really young. And he taught for a number of years, ended up going, he lived in St. Petersburg. That's where they sent him to school when he was 8 years old, like it was boarding school. And so he ended up studying in St. Petersburg. And then he ended up teaching for a number of years to finish his studies, and then he ended up becoming a professor of harmony at Moscow Conservatory. So he was at the St. Petersburg Conservatory, and then he ended up at Moscow at the conservatory there. And so he was there, and he was the professor of harmony there for 12 years, but he did some composing when he was there. But his composing actually ramped up kind of after that. And he was very, very poor. He had a lot of nerves, so he loved the ballet, and he started writing like Swan Lake, Romeo and Juliet. All of these are ballets that he did before he wrote the Nutcracker Suite. And they eventually became very popular, but the critics, initially the first take, they didn't love it. So when he would be directing, he'd be conducting the music, he would have crazy nerves because people didn't respond well the first few times. And so he had a lot of anxiety, and he had a lot of anxiety from a bunch of different things. One of the things they bring up is his sexual orientation or something like that. You don't need to bring that up, but financial problems, the way he was being received by the public. He had a disastrous marriage that lasted 9 weeks. It was a horrible, horrible marriage. He did get married eventually, but he was only 54 when he died. And so a year before he died, well, actually, 12 years before he died, this woman, this patron, she was kind of a crazy widower. She volunteered to pay his pension, pay it basically a salary every year, as long as they never met. So they corresponded for years and years and years. And she paid for him to compose and stuff. And so they became very, very close in correspondence, but they never met. And but 3 years before he passed away, all of a sudden, just suddenly, it stopped. And I don't know if she had died or what had happened, but she stopped sending him money. But then a year before he died, he wrote the Nutcracker Suite. That was right before he died, and that's where he really became famous, which is really unusual. A lot of times people that are composers or artists aren't ever famous during their time. But that last year of his life was the happiest year for him. He got a lot of recognition. The Nutcracker Suite was one of the most famous ballets. It's probably, if you were to ask most people, that would be the one they would think of. Swan Lake is very famous. Romeo, there are a lot of other ballets that are famous, but the Nutcracker. So then you can decide what you want to do about the Nutcracker. There's a number, so you can talk as much as or as little as you want about Tchaikovsky, but there are a couple of things you can do. My thing, what I'll probably do if I'm spending the time going through the positions and stuff, what I'm going to do myself is I'll either use, there's a rhythm activity in there too, I forgot. The rhythm activity, what they are suggesting is the waltz beat. So this is a little confusing because beat is standard. Rhythm is like, this would be the beat to row, 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 row your boat, but the rhythm is row, row, row your boat. So the rhythm is the notes. It's the way the notes go. The beat is the underneath, the metronome, right? So but in a waltz, it doesn't go like this, like a march. It's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's where the Waltz of the Flowers, dun 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 dun. So the Waltz of the Flowers is the piece that we're studying. You can play it for them, and it's way too fast to dance a waltz to. But you can divide the class in half and have half of the class do the downbeat and the other half of the class do the other beat. So you go dun, dun, dun. So it's going to be tricky if you have the teacher doing one, or you can have you and the teacher do the downbeat and the class do you can figure that out. But it is unusual because then you can switch over to the Russian dance or the dance with sugar plum fairies, and it's not a 3/4 beat. It's a 4/4 beat. So It's a straight. 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a different sound. They suggest you go to the Russian dance to compare the two. And you have all the dances of the Nutcracker Suite are on the main CD. So if you just have them on your phone or if you want to use the CD, you can play them then and compare. There's just so much to cover that it's hard. The last thing, and so if you want to, I have a flannel board. You can do it this way for the younger kids. What I would suggest, I've got the flannel board, but what I was thinking of doing is making the characters for the Nutcracker, they have them in the thing, making them a little bit bigger on cardstock and or on tag board, actually the heavier tag board like this, and putting them on popsicle sticks and making kids get up in the front and hold them. So I tell the story and have them be the people in it. So it's basically the story is Clara and Franz are these two little kids, if you haven't seen the Nutcracker. They're these two little kids, it's Christmas night, they're having a kind of a kid party, there's a big Christmas tree and it's all decorated. And they're there, and their favorite, I don't know if he's an uncle or not, Dr. Dosselmeyer is like this person that comes in, he always brings these really cool gifts. And Clara, all the kids get presents, but Clara gets the most unusual special gift, and it's a Nutcracker doll. And so she gets the doll, but Franz is jealous, her brother, and they fight, and they break the doll, and she's despondent, and she ends up, they all have to go to bed, and in the scene, usually the tree collapses, but you've got this, and she goes to bed, and then the doll gets big, and she comes creeping down to check on her doll, and she finds there's this whole army of toy soldiers that are life-size fighting, an army of life-size mice, and they're fighting, and she's like, oh my gosh, and she's worried for her special doll because the doll now is life-size. And so in the middle of this battle, she grabs the shoe off her foot and throws it at the Mouse King and knocks the Mouse King over, and it saves the day and defeats the mice. The shoe somehow defeats the mice. The mice run off, and the Nutcracker doll is so grateful. He goes over to her, he thanks her, and turns into a prince, of course. He's going to turn into a prince. So now he's a prince, and he then takes her on this journey. And so they go to kind of a snowy, they're traveling to this snowy area, and they end up in the land of sweets eventually, but first they meet the Snow Queen and King, and then they go into the land of sweets, and the sugar plum fairies, like they bring them in, and I think it's the sugar plum fairies that put them on their two thrones. There are two thrones sitting there. They seat them. They do a dance for them. And then you get all the other, there's the Chinese dancers, the Arabian dancers. You have flutes. The Chinese dancers are my favorite. They are on their, I don't know how they do what they do. It's really amazing. But they have all these different dances that go through. And then at the end, it's Waltz of the Flowers. That's the final dance is the Waltz of the Flowers. And the flowers are kind of waving and they drift away. And she's like, oh, it must have been a dream. And of course it was a dream, and she wakes up and it's over. So you can have them, you can put, if you want to use this, this is this Velcro stuff that you can stick to the back of the pictures. I personally am going to I don't want to make two sets. So I'm going to make the tag board ones with the popsicle sticks. Then you can have the kids get up. And so if you want to use that as an activity instead of doing the art, you can have them they can act it out with being Clara and Franz and the Mouse King, and you can throw a slipper. Oh, and I never even showed you. So when you explain about ballet, this is an actual point shoe that, they show that in a bunch of things. I know this is such all of my lessons are haphazard until the third lesson in on my Thursday, it all comes together. So then you can decide the activity that they suggest. There are two activities. The other activity you can't. There are two painting activities, one for the younger kids, one for the older kids. The older kids is like, you put down the thing, and then you put metal, you put like aluminum foil, you paint over that, then you burnish it with, there's not time for that. There's no way you'd have time. The other one is you get a 6-foot piece of string or yarn, you can do that, and then you just take a tin for paint and you dip it in that. And they each have their piece of white paper, and you then have them drop it on the paper, and it makes a design. You let it kind of dry, and then you carefully take it off, and it'll make a design. And then they can use that as the basis to do a drawing on it, or they can add texture to it if you want. So that's not, it's not a terribly hard or messy project. You could certainly do that if you wanted. I think I'm gonna go with the Nutcracker puppets, though. I think it's probably gonna be easier. So I'll put tempera paint and white paper in there. I didn't make the finger painting, the mixture. There was only one person that wanted it. So I didn't make it for people. The recipe was in the book anyway, if you wanted to do it. But I will have the tempera paints and the paper in there if you guys want to do the line. And the yarn is right there. So you just have to cut enough 6-foot lengths for your. And I'm sorry, this took way longer than it should have. Thank you for coming. That was the longest lesson ever. So